So I was recently diagnosed with hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome, or hEDS, which is a genetic connective tissue disorder that can cause a lot of problems in your joints or a lot of neurological issues, and basically can also cause issues in any part of your body because everything in your body needs connective tissues to function, and so EDS really looks different in every person. And so I thought that I would share what my genetics appointment looked like and also share a little bit about my story with EDS. So I have been chronically ill for about 2.5 years now, and prior to that I was a fairly healthy child and young adult. I did have off and on periods of being pretty sick from high school to college, but other than that, I was very active. I was a rock climber and a hiker, and I loved exercising, and I didn't have a whole lot of complications from that. I did have some joint pain and some injuries, but nothing that really held me back for long. And so my life really changed when I became sick about 2.5 years ago, and it kind of started with me getting really dizzy while exercising, and it kind of progressed from there. So I've been diagnosed with several conditions over the last few years. The first thing I was diagnosed with was POTS, which is also called postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, and I was originally told that that was my only problem. And we found as the years went on that was not true at all. And so I was also diagnosed with intracranial hypertension, which is essentially high cerebral spinal fluid pressure on the brain. And then I was diagnosed with Chiari malformation and craniocervical instability, which is why I'm wearing this neck brace. I have a lot of severe jaw problems, some GI issues. I have celiac disease. I've had several severe cerebral spinal fluid leaks. I'm probably missing a few, but those are the main things that I've been diagnosed with so far. And so a lot of my doctors, thought that something underlying had to be going on to be causing all of these kind of like rare conditions to present. And so several of my doctors did suspect EDS prior to my genetics appointment because of all the comorbid conditions that I had already been diagnosed with. And so we kind of knew that something was going on with my connective tissues, and EDS was suspected, but it wasn't confirmed until this recent genetics appointments that I had. Before I went to my genetics appointment, I was definitely very curious what it was going to look like, and so I thought I would share what my experience was. It was pretty simple. We went in like a normal doctor's appointment, and the nurse had me change into a gown so that the doctor could assess my skin and do a lot of measurements that are required to test for EDS and other genetic conditions. So my geneticist already knew that EDS was highly suspected. She had a referral from my neurosurgeon in Maryland describing all of the traits that he saw that pointed towards EDS. And so she explained to me that there were very specific diagnostic criteria for hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and that she was going to go through the 2017 diagnostic criteria with me. And so she showed me this sheet right here that you may have seen. I'll put a link down below if you want to look at it in more detail. But essentially there are 3 different sets of criteria to go through to be diagnosed with hEDS. So the first criteria of diagnosing EDS is basically going to assess your joint hypermobility using the Beighton scale. So you'll get a score from 0 to 9 depending on how hypermobile some of your joints are. So the first one that they'll look at is, do your pinkies bend back further than 90 degrees? And so that's a point for each hand. And then the next one is, do your thumbs bend all the way back to your wrists. That's a point for each side as well. The next one is do your elbows hyperextend more than 10 degrees, and that's a point for each arm. The next one is looking at the hypermobility of your knees, and so if your knees hyperextend more than 10 degrees on both legs, and that's a point for each leg. Then the last one is, can you bend over and put your palms flat on the ground with your legs being straight? Based on those, you'll get a score from 0 to 9. I scored a 5 or 6 out of 9. My knees are not hypermobile, which actually makes a lot of sense because when I was growing up and playing sports, my knees never hurt, but a lot of my other joints did, so that was just kind of interesting to me. And then I also can't bend over and put my palms flat on the floor, and other than that, I was hypermobile in all the other areas. So the second criteria for diagnosing EDS has 3 sections to it, and the first section has 12 different items that you need to have at least 5 out of 12 to qualify for that section. And so the first one is, do you have unusually soft or velvety skin? And your geneticist will look at your skin in a lot of areas of your body to determine that. The next one is, do you have mild skin hyperextensibility, or is your skin more stretchy than the average person? And they'll actually measure your skin, and they have specific requirements for that. Like for me, my neck is one of the more stretchy areas for me, and it's almost 3 centimeters. The next one is, do you have stretch marks in various parts of your body? And your geneticist will look to see if that's something that you have. The next one is, do you have bilateral papules of the heel? And so these are mostly seen when you are bearing weight on your heels. So they'll have you stand and they'll look at your heels and feel them to see if you have these white little bumps on both of your heels. The next one is, do you have recurrent or multiple abdominal hernias? And then the next one is, do you have atrophic scarring at least 2 sites with the absence of some other things that are seen in classical EDS? The next one is, do you have pelvic floor, rectal, or uterine prolapse in children, men, or women without a history of morbid obesity? The next one is, do you have dental crowding or a high or narrow palate? And so like a lot of us had, like I had an expander, a palate expander put in when I had braces, and I also have high palate. The next one is arachnodactyly, which is something that's actually seen in a lot of patients with Marfan syndrome. These features often cross over with EDS. And so the first one is, do you have a positive Walker sign on your wrist on both sides? And so that means, can you overlap your pinky and thumb when going around your wrists? And then the other option is, do you have a positive thumb Steinberg sign on both sides? So if your thumb extends over the back of your hand, then that would count as a positive Steinberg sign. The next one is, do you have an arm span to height ratio of greater than 1.05? And so your geneticist will measure your arm span going across like this, as well as your height, and calculate the ratio to see if you qualify. I qualified for that. My arms are super long. Then the next one is, do you have mitral valve prolapse shown on your echocardiogram? From my echo about 2 years ago, I did not show this, but she did actually listen to my heart, which your geneticist will probably do too. And she actually said she heard something that seemed like mitral valve prolapse, so I'm not really sure if I have that or not. And then the last one is, do you have aortic root dilation with a z-score of +2 or greater? And that's another thing that can be seen on your echocardiogram. And so I had about 7 or 8 out of 12 of these different things, and so I qualified for that section. The next section of criterion 2 is, do you have a positive family history with one or more first-degree relative qualifying for the criteria of hEDS? I did not have that, though I guess it could be possible. None of my other family members have been evaluated. So the last section of criterion 2 includes 3 different options, and you have to have at least one to qualify for that section. And the first one is, do you have musculoskeletal pain in 2 or more limbs reoccurring daily for at least 3 months? The next one is, do you have chronic widespread pain that lasts for at least 3 months? And then the next one is, do you have recurrent joint dislocations or frank joint instability in the absence of trauma? So like, for example, my neck and skull instability would be an example of that. And then the final criterion 3 of diagnosing hEDS is just making sure that you don't have any other more rare types of EDS or other connective tissue disorders or autoimmune disorders that might have similar features to EDS. So your geneticist will be able to tell you more about that, and you can read more about that on the EDS website if you would like to. So one thing that I wanted to note is that it's important to remember that hypermobility doesn't equal EDS. As you can see, as I went through all these different criteria, just being hypermobile alone doesn't mean that you have EDS. And so it's important that you see a knowledgeable doctor, and preferably a geneticist, to assess you for EDS if you think that you might have it. But my geneticist did say that at her recent genetics meetings about EDS, they are thinking that the 2017 criteria is a bit too strict, actually, for diagnosing EDS. So it could change in the future. I don't know. Right now, this is the diagnostic criteria, but you know, it's always subject to change as they learn more about the condition, and hopefully they'll eventually identify a gene for hEDS so that they'll be able to identify it a little bit easier. And some people say that, you know, it doesn't even matter to get a diagnosis of EDS, which I disagree with. When you know that you have EDS, you're able to find doctors that are aware of it and that can help you, and you're also able to be led in the right direction for, you know, learning about comorbid conditions that you might have because of your EDS that might be more rare in the general population, and so doctors might not think to test for it. So I really do think that it's important to be tested correctly for EDS and to know if you have it. Like for me, I've been diagnosed with a lot of conditions that are kind of rare in the general population but are really common in the EDS population, and so now it all just makes sense. And it took over 2 years of actively searching for a diagnosis for me, and I really, I don't think it should take that long. I hope that in the future doctors will become more aware of EDS and that they will be able to identify it and diagnose it a lot sooner so that people can get the help that they need. So something that I wanted to point out that I actually found on the official Ehlers-Danlos website before I had my genetics appointment that I really related to. So I'll go ahead and read that. It says, many other features are described in hEDS, but most are not sufficiently specific or sensitive to be included in formal diagnostic criteria at the moment. These include, but are not limited to, sleep disturbance, fatigue, postural orthostatic tachycardia, functional gastrointestinal disorders, dysautonomia, anxiety, and depression. These other systematic manifestations may be more debilitating than the joint symptoms, often impair functionality and quality of life, and should always be determined during clinical encounters. And so I definitely related to this because I do have joint pain, but it's not nearly as severe as a lot of the comorbid conditions that I have with EDS, such as Chiari, POTS, craniocervical instability, and things like that. And so those are the conditions that are really making me chronically ill and causing me to have lower quality of life versus, my elbows and my toes and my knees. And I just wanted to share this because it definitely shows that EDS looks so different in every person. Some people, their main problem is that they dislocate their joints multiple times a day, and that's horrible. But I don't experience that. I have some joints that give me more troubles than others, obviously in my neck area and my jaw, my hips. But other than that, I would definitely say that my joint pain doesn't necessarily alter my quality of life nearly as much as a lot of the other conditions that I have. So keep that in mind. I hope this video was helpful for you, and I wish you all of the best in, your journey to being diagnosed or evaluated for EDS, or if you've already been diagnosed, I wish you the best. It's a really tough condition to have, and I hope that you find all of the answers and help that you really need. If you guys have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave them below. And if you want to see more videos from me, you can go ahead and click the subscribe button. I will definitely be making some more videos about EDS as I continue to learn more. Thanks!